Commander Vextel sat alone in his small metal room aboard the medical ship Karthos. His forearms shook as he reached for the recording device. The blue lights above cast strange shadows on his gray skin. 3 of his limbs were gone now, replaced with cold metal parts that clicked when he moved. The human doctors had done good work, but the metal reminded him every day of what he had lost. He looked at the recording device for a long time. Zephyrian High Command had made it clear that no soldiers should speak about the war with the humans. They said it was classified information. They said it would hurt morale. But Vexel had seen too much to stay quiet anymore. His entire battalion was dead. His best friends were dead. And the humans were still out there, probably laughing about it. The device made a soft beep when he turned it on. Vexel cleared. His throat a sound like rocks grinding together. His voice was deeper than any human voice, but it carried pain that any species could understand. This is Commander Vexel of the 47th Shock Battalion, Zephyrian Imperial Forces. I am recording this against direct orders from my superiors. They want us to forget what happened on the human worlds. They want us to pretend it was just another war. But it was not just another war, it was something else entirely. He paused and looked out the small window. Stars moved slowly past as the ship traveled through space. Somewhere out there were the human worlds, full of those strange creatures that had destroyed everything he thought he knew about warfare. I have fought in 17 campaigns across the galaxy. I have seen the Korthok warriors fall before our weapons. I have watched the crystal cities of Andromeda burn. I have stood over the bodies of 1,000 enemies from a dozen different worlds. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for fighting humans. Vexel remembered the briefing room on the flagship Eternal Glory. General Korthful had stood at the front of the room, his massive frame blocking the star charts behind him. The general was old, even by Zephyrian standards, and his hide was covered in scars from 50 years of conquest. When he spoke, every soldier listened. Soldiers of the Empire, the general had said, his voice booming through the metal chamber. Today we discuss our next target, a small world called Earth, populated by creatures that call themselves humans. They are weak, soft creatures that stand only half our height. Their technology is primitive. Their military seems to have no real structure or discipline. The soldiers in the room had laughed. Vexel remembered laughing too. It seemed like a joke. The Empire had conquered 47 star systems. They had crushed civilizations that had ruled space for millions of years. How could these tiny humans be any different? Admiral Nexara had stepped forward then, her silver armor gleaming under the lights. She was the finest military mind in the Empire, a strategist who had never lost a single battle. Her confidence filled the room like a drug. Intelligence reports show that humans fight among themselves constantly, Chet explained, pointing at images of human soldiers on the display screen. They cannot even unite their own planet. They use crude weapons, simple tactics, and their armies fall apart at the first sign of real resistance. This will not be a war. This will be a demonstration. The images showed human soldiers in green uniforms, carrying small weapons that looked like toys compared to Zephyrian plasma rifles. The humans looked so small, so fragile. Their skin was thin and pale, nothing like the thick gray hide that protected Zephyrian warriors. They had only 2 arms, 2 legs, and their heads were tiny. How could such creatures possibly fight back? Against the might of the Empire, we will strike their military bases first, General Korthfel had continued. Destroy their command structure, eliminate their leaders, and the rest will surrender immediately. Humans are known for being cowards. They value their individual lives more than honor or duty. Once they see real warriors, they will beg for mercy. Vexel had felt proud to be part of such an easy victory. The 47th Shock Battalion was elite, the best of the best. They had taken fortified positions that other units could not even approach. They were trained from birth to fight, to kill, to conquer. Against these weak humans, it would be like crushing insects. The invasion fleet had been magnificent. The 300 ships of war carrying the finest soldiers in the galaxy. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, built to last for centuries, and armed with weapons that could crack planets. The humans had nothing that could even scratch their armor. The target was a human colony called New Dakota.
At
Intelligence said it was defended by only a few hundred human soldiers and some outdated weapons. It was supposed to be the perfect place to start the conquest, a small victory that would show the humans how hopeless their situation was. Vexthel remembered standing in the transport ship with his squad as they approached the planet. Through the windows, New Dakota looked beautiful, with blue oceans and green land masses. It seemed peaceful, quiet, like a world that had never known war. The human settlements were small and scattered, with no real defenses visible from space. "Look at it," Sergeant Gorthel had said, laughing as he checked his weapon. "They do not even have orbital defense platforms. This will be over before lunch." The landing had gone perfectly. The transport ships descended through the atmosphere without any resistance. The humans did not even try to shoot them down. They just watched as 3,000 Zephyrian warriors landed near their main city. Vexthel had thought it proved everything the generals had said about human cowardice. But then something strange happened. As the Zephyrian forces formed up for their assault, a single human soldier walked out of the city alone. He was small, maybe 5.5 feet tall, wearing simple green clothing and carrying an old rifle. He had short brown hair and calm blue eyes. His name, they learned later, was Captain Jake Morrison. Morrison walked to within 50 yards of the Zephyrian army and stopped. He looked up at the towering alien warriors without any sign of fear. Then he did something that confused every Zephyrian present. He smiled. "Welcome to New Dakota," Morrison called out, his voice carrying clearly across the open ground. "We have been waiting for you." General Korthfell had been amused by this display. He stepped forward, his massive form dwarfing the small human. "Surrender now, creature, and your death will be quick." Morrison's smile grew wider. "Oh, we are not planning to die today, General, but thank you for the offer." That was when the first explosion hit. The blast came from underground, erupting right beneath the front ranks of Zephyrian soldiers. The humans had somehow planted massive bombs in the soil without anyone noticing. 20 warriors died instantly, their armor cracked open like eggs. Before anyone could react, more explosions followed, each one perfectly timed and placed. Captain Morrison had never stopped smiling. Even as chaos erupted around him, even as Zephyrian weapons began firing in his direction, he stood there calmly. He spoke into a small device attached to his chest. "Welcome party is ready. Light them up." The sky above New Dakota suddenly filled with fire. Human aircraft appeared from nowhere, dropping bombs and firing missiles with deadly accuracy. They must have been hiding somehow, using technology the Zephyrians did not understand. The perfectly organized invasion force began to scatter as warriors dove for cover, but the real horror had not even begun yet. Vexthel stopped the recording and rubbed his remaining organic hand across his face. Even now, months later, he could still hear the sounds of that first battle, the screaming, the explosions, the terrible laughter of human soldiers who seemed to enjoy every moment of the fight. He started the recording again, his voice quieter. Now, full of the weight of memory. "We thought we were attacking a world of farmers and merchants. We discovered we had landed in the middle of a carefully prepared trap. And Captain Jake Morrison, that small human with his calm smile." Vexthel turned off the recording device and sat in silence for several minutes. His metal hand made small clicking sounds as he moved his fingers. The memories of New Dakota were like poison in his mind, but he had to continue. Other Zephyrian soldiers needed to know what they were really fighting against. He activated the device again and continued his story. The battle for New Dakota was supposed to last 3 hours. It lasted 18 days. What we thought would be a simple conquest became our introduction to something we had never encountered before. Humans do not fight like any other species. In the galaxy, they do not follow the rules of war that civilized beings understand. Vexthel remembered how quickly everything had gone wrong after that first explosion. The Zephyrian army, which had landed in perfect formation, was scattered across the landscape within minutes. Captain Morrison and his small force of Marines had vanished into the human city, leaving behind a battlefield full of traps and surprises. "We tried to follow our standard tactics," Vexthel continued. surround the enemy, cut off their supply lines, force them to surrender through superior firepower. But the humans did not behave like enemies were supposed to behave. They did not stay in one place. They did not protect their important buildings. They did not even seem to care about their own safety. The first sign that this was different came when Sergeant Lisa Campbell appeared. Campbell was a human combat engineer, a small woman with red hair and green eyes who looked like she should be working in a garden, not fighting in a war.
Ow.
But Campbell had turned the entire city of New Dakota into a weapon. Every building was a trap. Every street corner hid an explosive device. The humans had rigged their own homes, their schools, even their hospitals, to explode when Zephyrian soldiers entered. Campbell and her team had spent months preparing for this invasion, turning a peaceful colony into a maze of death. We entered a human school building, thinking it might be their command center, Vexel said, his voice growing quieter. It looked innocent enough. Small desks for human children, colorful pictures on the walls, toys scattered on the floor. But when my squad reached the second floor, the entire building collapsed. Campbell had weakened the support beams so precisely that the building would fall only when enough weight was on the upper level. 6 of Vexel's best soldiers died in that collapse. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was what happened afterward, as the surviving Zephyrians dug through the rubble, trying to rescue their trapped comrades. They heard something that chilled them to their core. Laughter, human laughter, coming from hidden speakers throughout the ruins. They were watching us, Vexel explained. They had cameras hidden everywhere, and they were watching us die. They were laughing about it. The psychological warfare was unlike anything the Zephyrians had encountered. In civilized warfare, enemies might try to frighten each other or damage morale. But humans took it to a level that seemed insane. Lieutenant Bobby Turner, a young human soldier with a friendly face and an easy smile, became the voice of this campaign of terror. Turner would appear on captured Zephyrian communication channels at random times. He never threatened or boasted. Instead, he would tell jokes, sing songs, or just chat like he was talking to old friends. But he would do this while covered in Zephyrian blood, standing over the bodies of alien soldiers he had just killed. "Good morning, boys," Turner would say cheerfully, his human teeth white against the dark blood on his face. "Beautiful day for a war, is it not? No. I just finished having breakfast with some of your friends." "Well, I had breakfast. It became breakfast, if you know what I mean." Then he would laugh, that terrible human sound that seemed to find joy in the most horrible situations. Other human soldiers would join in, their voices mixing together in a chorus of madness that drove several Zephyrian officers to complete mental breakdown. "We could not understand it," Vexel said. "In our culture, warriors are serious about battle. We fight with honor, we respect our enemies, we do not mock the dead. But humans seem to treat the entire war like some kind of game they were enjoying." The Battle of Hadley's Ridge became the symbol of human stubbornness. Major Katie Brooks and her battalion of 200 soldiers held a small hill against 3,000 Zephyrian warriors for 6 days. The hill had no strategic value. There were no important resources there, no weapons, no supply depots. It was just a piece of high ground covered with rocks and small trees. But Brooks had decided to make a stand there, and her soldiers followed her lead. They dug trenches with their bare hands when their equipment broke, used rocks as weapons. When their ammunition ran out, they fought with broken bones, with bleeding wounds, with infections that would have killed weaker beings. On the 3rd day, we offered them terms of surrender, Vexel remembered, told them we would let them live if they gave up. Major Brooks sent back a message that consisted of only 2 human words. I will not repeat those words, but they made her position very clear. The humans fought at night, when most civilized species would rest. They fought in the rain, when the conditions were miserable. They fought when they were hungry, when they were wounded, when any reasonable being would seek medical attention. Sleep seemed optional for them. Food seemed optional. Even basic survival seemed less important than continuing to fight. On the 4th day, Captain Danny Rodriguez arrived with reinforcements for the Zephyrian forces. Rodriguez was supposed to break the human resistance with fresh troops and heavy weapons. Instead, he encountered something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The humans had been collecting the bodies of dead Zephyrian soldiers, but Instead of treating them with respect as civilized beings would do, they had arranged the corpses in patterns that could be seen from space. When Rodriguez looked down from his transport ship, he saw Zephyrian bodies spelling out words in the human language. Words that mocked the Empire, words that questioned the intelligence of Zephyrian commanders, words that cannot be repeated. In polite company. It was not just disrespectful, Vexel said, his voice shaking with emotion. It was a deliberate attack on our minds, our beliefs, our entire way of understanding the world. They were not just killing our bodies, they were trying to kill our spirits. Rodriguez had been a veteran of 30 campaigns. He had seen death in every form imaginable. But the sight of his fellow warriors used as materials for human artwork broke something inside him. He spent the rest of the war in a medical facility. Unable to function as a soldier, the humans on Hadley's Ridge finally ran out of ammunition. On the 6th day, Zephyrian forces prepared for the final assault, expecting the humans to surrender now that they could no longer fight effectively. Instead, Major Brooks and her remaining soldiers fixed bayonets to their rifles and charged down the hill directly at the Zephyrian positions. 50 humans against 3,000 Zephyrians, Vexiel said. They had no ammunition, no heavy weapons, no chance of victory. They charged anyway. They fought with knives, with rocks, with their bare hands. They died, of course. But they took 200 of our warriors with them. The final horror came when the Zephyrian soldiers examined the human positions after the battle. Brooks and her soldiers had been eating the bodies of dead Zephyrians. Not because they were starving, the investigation showed, but because they wanted to send a message. They wanted their enemies to know that humans would do anything, absolutely anything, to keep fighting. We began to realize that we were not fighting soldiers, Vexel continued. We were fighting something else entirely, something that treated war not as a necessary evil, but as an art form they had been perfecting for thousands of years. The reports from other battles were equally disturbing. Human units would continue fighting even after their commanders were killed. They would fight without orders, without supplies, without hope of victory. They seemed to find strength in desperation, to become more dangerous as their situation became more hopeless. Vexel stopped the recording again and looked at his metal hand. The human doctors who had built it had made it stronger than his original limb. Even their mercy was a form of superiority. By the end of the first month, he said when he restarted the recording, we had learned a terrible truth. We had not invaded a world of farmers and merchants. Vexel stared at the wall of his medical room for a long time before continuing his recording. The metal walls reminded him of the human ships he had seen during the war. Cold, efficient, built for one purpose only. I had learned to fear that. Human efficiency, more than their weapons. The 3rd month of the war changed everything. He began again. We stopped thinking of humans as individual soldiers and started to see them as parts of something much larger. Something that worked like a machine, but thought like a living creature. A machine that learned from every mistake, adapted to every new situation, and never, ever stopped moving forward. The first sign of this larger truth came when Colonel Amy Stone arrived at the human colony of New Pittsburgh. Stone was not a combat soldier. She was a logistics officer, someone who managed supplies and equipment. In Zephyrian culture, such people stayed far from the fighting, safe in their offices and computer centers. But humans did not seem to separate. Their warriors from their support staff, Stone arrived on New Pittsburgh 3 days after the Zephyrian fleet began bombing the planet. She came not with weapons, but with data, tablets, and communication devices. Within 6 hours of her arrival, the entire nature of the human resistance changed. We had been fighting separate groups of humans, Vexel explained. Small units that fought hard, but had no connection to each other. Suddenly, they all started working together like parts of the same organism. Attacks became coordinated across entire continents. Supply lines appeared where none had existed before. It was like watching a broken machine suddenly start working. Perfectly. Stone had turned the war into a mathematics problem. She calculated exactly how much ammunition each human unit needed, how much food, how much medical supplies. She figured out the best routes to move equipment across battlefields. The optimal timing for attacks, the precise moment when human forces should retreat to save their strength for the next fight. But the real shock was what Stone did with the Zephyrian attack patterns. She studied how the Empire's forces moved, how they chose their targets, how they supplied their armies. Then she started predicting where they would attack next. Human defenders were always waiting, always prepared, always one step ahead. It was impossible, Vextel said, his voice filled with frustration even now. How could one human, sitting in a destroyed city, coordinate resistance across 17 different star systems? How could she know what our commanders were planning before they had even made their final decisions? The answer came from director Steve Parker on the factory world of New Pittsburgh. Parker managed what humans called their industrial base, the factories and workshops that built their weapons and equipment. The Zephyrians had expected to find primitive manufacturing centers, simple workshops that could be easily destroyed. Instead, they found something that violated every rule of civilized warfare. The humans had built their entire economy around the idea that war could start at any moment. Every factory, every workshop, every small business was designed to switch from making civilian goods to making weapons within hours. We bombed a factory. That made toys for human children, Vexlow remembered. The next day, that same factory was producing ammunition for human soldiers. We destroyed a food processing plant, and within a week it was manufacturing chemical weapons. It was like fighting an enemy that could regenerate lost limbs instantly. Parker's industrial network could replace destroyed human ships faster than the Zephyrians could destroy them. When the Empire's forces won a battle and captured a human base, they would find that the humans had already built 3 new bases somewhere else. The war was not just about winning individual fights. It was about outproducing the enemy. Humans were very good at production. The siege of Kepler's station showed the true horror of human naval strategy. Commander Rick Thompson commanded the Human Defense Fleet, a collection of ships that looked crude and primitive compared to Zephyrian vessels. Empire ships were beautiful, designed to last for centuries. Built with the finest materials and the most advanced technology, human ships looked like they had been thrown together in a hurry. Their hulls were rough, their weapons were simple, their interiors were cramped and uncomfortable. Zephyrian officers laughed when they saw them, thinking they would be easy targets for the Empire's magnificent war fleet. The laughter stopped when Thompson's ships started ramming into Zephyrian vessels.
Oh.
They used their own ships as weapons, Vexel said, his voice still filled with disbelief. Not as a last resort, not when they were desperate. It was their planned strategy from the beginning. They built ships specifically to crash them into our fleet. The human vessels were designed to be expendable. They were cheap to build, quick to replace, and piloted by crews who seemed to view their own deaths as acceptable losses. When a human ship was damaged, instead of retreating for repairs, it would accelerate toward the nearest Zephyrian vessel and explode on impact. Thompson's fleet destroyed 12 Empire battleships in one battle. Not through superior firepower, but through what could only be called organized suicide. The human commander treated his ships like ammunition, his crews like guided missiles, his entire fleet like a single-use weapon system. We could not comprehend it, Vextel continued. Our ships were irreplaceable masterpieces, crewed by warriors, who had trained for decades. How could these humans throw away their vessels and their lives so casually? How could they treat their own technology as disposable? The answer came from engineer Nancy Clark and her technical teams. Clark had been studying captured Zephyrian equipment, not to understand how it worked, but to find ways to make it work better. Human engineers took Empire technology and somehow improved it, making weapons more powerful, armor more protective, ships faster and more maneuverable. But the improvements always came with a cost. The humans would make Zephyrian equipment more effective, but also more fragile. They traded longevity for power, reliability for performance.
Ow.
Everything they touched became more dangerous, but also more likely to break. They were not trying to build things that would last, Vexel realized. They were building things that would win the current battle, even if they destroyed themselves in the process. Every weapon, every ship, every piece of equipment was designed for maximum short-term impact. The most disturbing example was what happened to the Zephyrian prisoners. Manek Tony Walsh ran the human prisoner of war camps, and his methods were unlike anything in civilized warfare. He did not torture prisoners or execute them. Instead, he healed them. Walsh would take wounded Zephyrian soldiers and repair their injuries with human medical technology. But the repairs were always improvements over the original biology. Broken bones became stronger metal replacements. Damaged organs became more efficient artificial versions. Lost limbs became advanced prosthetics with capabilities beyond natural flesh. They made us better than we had been, Vexel said, flexing his metal fingers. But in doing so, they made us dependent on their technology. We could not maintain these improvements without human help. We became living advertisements for their superiority. The psychological effect was devastating. Zephyrian soldiers began to see human capture not as a fate worse than death, but as an opportunity for improvement. Of their natural strength started to envy the enhanced capabilities of the prisoners who had been treated by human medics. More disturbing was what happened to the families of the prisoners. Walsh would send recordings back to Zephyrian worlds, showing the captured soldiers living comfortable lives, stronger and healthier than they had ever been. The message was clear. Surrender to the humans meant improvement, not defeat, we realized. That humans did not just want to win the war, Vexel said. They wanted to win all future wars. Every tactic, every strategy, every mercy was designed to make sure that no species would ever threaten them again. The final proof came when the human supply lines were discovered. Empire intelligence had been trying to figure out how the humans maintained their war effort across so many worlds. The answer was both simple and terrifying. They had been preparing for this war. For decades before it started, human Admiral Helen Wright had been captured during a raid on a supply depot. Under interrogation, she revealed that humanity had been studying every piece of evidence of alien life for over 50 years. They had developed weapons specifically designed to fight unknown enemies. They had trained their military to assume that any alien contact would be hostile. They were not surprised by our invasion, Vexel said. They'd been expecting it. They'd been hoping for it. We gave them the excuse they needed to test all the weapons and tactics they had been developing in secret. The recording device beeped, indicating low battery. Vexel looked at it with his natural eye, then at the wall with his artificial one. The human-made eye was better than his original, giving him enhanced vision and the ability to see in darkness. Even their gifts were weapons. We thought we were fighting a war, he said softly. We discovered we were participating in a human training exercise, and we were not the students. Vexel replaced the battery in his recording device with his metal hand. The human-made fingers moved more smoothly than his original ones ever had. He sometimes wondered if the humans had planned that too, making their replacements better, so that every Zephyrian would remember their superiority with every movement. By the 6th month of the war, we began to understand that we were not fighting a species that had just learned about warfare. We were fighting a species that had been perfecting the art of killing for thousands of years. And they had been preparing specifically for us long before we even knew they existed. The breakthrough came when Admiral Helen Wright was captured. During a raid on the human supply depot at Cygnus 7, Wright was not like other human prisoners. She did not seem afraid or angry. Instead, she seemed almost pleased to be captured, like this was something she had been expecting all along. During her interrogation, Wright revealed something that changed everything the Zephyrians thought they knew about the war. She sat in the detention cell, completely calm, and smiled at her captors with the same confidence that Captain Morrison had shown on New Dakota. "You really do not understand, do you?" Wright had said to General Korthvel himself. "This war started when your ships appeared in our space. But we have been fighting this war for 50 years. We have been preparing for you since we first looked at the stars and realized we were probably not alone." Wright explained that human governments had been developing weapons and strategies for alien invasion since the early days of their space program. Every science fiction story, every military exercise, every theoretical discussion about extraterrestrial contact had been focused on one central assumption: aliens would be hostile. "We knew you were out there," Wright continued, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. "We knew you would eventually find us. We knew you would try to conquer us. So we spent decades getting ready. Every weapon you have faced, every tactic that has surprised you, every strategy that has frustrated your plans, we developed all of it specifically to fight aliens like you. The humans had studied every theoretical advantage that alien species might have: superior technology, larger physical size, advanced spacecraft, coordinated military forces, They had developed countermeasures for all of it. The weapons that seemed to work so well against Zephyrian equipment were not accidents. They were the result of decades of research into how to fight enemies with unknown capabilities. "You made one critical mistake, right?" told the shocked Zephyrian. "Officers, you assumed we would fight like civilized beings. But civilization is a luxury that species can only afford when they are not facing extinction. We have been planning for extinction since we first left our planet." Operative Gary Hughes proved Wright's point in the most disturbing way possible. Hughes had infiltrated Zephyrian command structures so completely that he knew about invasion. Plans before some Zephyrian officers received their orders. He had been living among the Empire's forces for months, pretending to be a captured human who had converted to serve his alien masters. Hughes spoke perfect Zephyrian, understood their culture better than many natives, and had gained the trust of high-ranking military officials. When he was finally discovered, the security breach was so complete that the Empire had to assume all their communications had been compromised from the beginning. "How long have your spies been among us?" General Korthfeld demanded during Hughes's interrogation. Hughes laughed. That terrible human sound that had become so familiar to Zephyrian soldiers. "General, we have been preparing for this war longer than your empire has existed. Did you really think we would not have people in place when you arrived?" The revelation that humans had been infiltrating alien civilizations for decades was devastating to Zephyrian morale. Every alien they had met, every trading partner, every diplomatic contact, could potentially be a human spy. The paranoia spread through the Empire's forces like a disease, but the real horror was what the humans did with the intelligence they gathered. Weapons specialist Dr. Linda Foster had been developing countermeasures to Zephyrian technology based on stolen plans and captured equipment. When Zephyrian energy shields proved superior to human defenses, Foster created frequency cycling weapons that made the shields useless within days. "She did not just copy our technology," Vexel explained. "She improved it, then found ways to destroy it. Every advantage we thought we had, she turned into a weakness. Our strongest armor became a trap that held us motionless. Our most advanced shields became beacons that guided human weapons to their targets." Explosives expert Pete Johnson demonstrated the human approach to problem-solving in the most direct way possible. When Zephyrian armor proved too strong for conventional human weapons, Johnson did not try to build more powerful guns. He created explosives that used the armor's own strength against the wearer. The devices were simple in concept, but devastating in application. They attached to Zephyrian armor and then vibrated at precisely the frequency that would cause the metal to tear itself apart. The stronger the armor, the more destructive the vibration became. Warriors who had felt invincible in their protective suits suddenly found themselves trapped inside metal coffins that were slowly shaking themselves to pieces. "They did not try to overpower us," Vexel said. "They made us overpower ourselves. Every strength we possessed became a weakness in their hands. Every advantage we thought we had became a tool they could use against us." The psychological warfare reached its peak under Dr. Carol Martinez, human specialist who studied alien minds like a scientist studying insects. Martinez did not torture Zephyrian prisoners or threaten them with death. Instead, she talked to them. Martinez would sit with captured Zephyrian soldiers for hours, asking questions about their families, their homes, their beliefs, their fears. She seemed genuinely interested in their answers, taking notes and asking follow-up questions like a friendly researcher. The prisoners began to think of her as harmless, even helpful. But Martinez was learning how Zephyrian minds worked, how they processed fear and pain and loyalty. She discovered that Zephyrians were social creatures who could not function well when isolated from their units. She learned that they had deep cultural fears about dishonoring their ancestors. She found the psychological pressure points that could break a warrior's will without laying a finger on them. Then she used that knowledge to destroy entire Zephyrian battalions without firing a shot. Martinez would broadcast messages targeted at specific cultural fears, arrange battlefield conditions that triggered deep psychological responses, and create situations that made brave warriors doubt everything they believed about themselves. "Turned our own minds against us," Vexel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She made us afraid of things that should not have frightened warriors. She made us doubt our training, our leaders, our purpose. She made us weak by making us think. General Frank Peterson represented the final, most terrifying aspect of human warfare: their patience. Peterson had been planning military campaigns that would take decades to complete. He was designing strategies for wars that might last centuries. He was thinking about conflicts that would involve multiple generations of soldiers. When we captured Peterson, Vexel continued, we expected him to be concerned about immediate tactical situations. Instead, he wanted to discuss the economic factors that would determine the outcome of the war 50 years from now. He was planning battles that his grandchildren would fight. Peterson explained to his captors that humans had been at war with themselves for most of their recorded history. They had developed strategies for conflicts lasting generations, weapons designed to destroy entire civilizations, and tactics that accounted for enemy adaptation over decades of fighting. "You are thinking about this war," Peterson told the Zephyrian officers. "We are thinking about all future wars. You want to win this conflict? You want to make sure no alien species ever threatens humanity again." The implications were staggering. The humans were not just fighting to defend their territory or protect their people. They were fighting to establish themselves as the dominant species in the galaxy. Every battle, every strategy, every tactical decision was designed to ensure that no alien civilization would ever be able to challenge human supremacy. "We began to realize that surrender might not even be possible," Vexel said. "The humans did not want to defeat us. They wanted to absorb us, to make us part of their larger plan for galactic dominance. They wanted to turn us into tools they could use against the next species that threatened them." The recording device made a soft sound, indicating that it was nearly full. Vexel looked at it with both his natural eye and his artificial one. The human-made replacement was already showing him things his original eye never could have seen. Even their mercy was a form of conquest. "By the end of the 6th month," he said quietly, "we understood the truth. We're not fighting a war against humans. We were participating in humanity's final examination before they took their place as the rulers of the galaxy. And we were helping them pass." Vexel looked at his recording device one last time. The small red light indicated it was almost out of memory. Soon, he would have to decide whether to send this recording to other Zephyrian survivors or delete it and pretend none of this had ever happened. But first, he had to finish his story, had to tell the final, most disturbing truth about humanity. The war ended not with a great battle, but with a conversation. When the Zephyrian High Command finally understood what they were really fighting, they tried to surrender. But humans do not accept surrender the way civilized species do. They accept transformation. The final phase began when Admiral Patricia Green arrived at the Zephyrian flagship Eternal Glory under a flag of truce. Green was not what the Zephyrian leaders had expected. She was small, even by human standards, with gray hair and kind eyes. She looked like someone's grandmother. It's not the commander of humanity's war machine. General Korthful had prepared for difficult negotiations. He expected the humans to demand territory, resources, perhaps tribute payments. He was ready to give up entire star systems if it meant ending the nightmare that the war had become. The general had been broken by months of losing battles against an enemy that seemed to get stronger with every defeat. But Green did not want star systems or resources. She wanted something much more valuable and much more frightening. "We accept your surrender," Green said calmly, sitting across from the most powerful military leaders in the Zephyrian Empire. "But surrender is not enough. You attacked us because you thought we were weak. You must make sure no species ever makes that mistake again." Green's terms were unlike anything in the history of galactic warfare. She demanded complete Zephyrian disarmament, but not just of weapons. She wanted the dismantling of the entire Zephyrian military culture. No more warrior training, no more weapons research, no more dreams of conquest. But that was just the beginning. Green wanted human observers placed in every Zephyrian school, teaching human history and human values to Zephyrian children. She wanted human advisors in every Zephyrian government office, helping to reshape alien society along human principles. She wanted the gradual transformation of an entire species. "You will become our partners," Green explained, her voice gentle, but her words terrifying. "You will help us watch for other threats to galactic peace. You will serve as examples of what happens to species that choose cooperation over conquest. The occupation that followed was unlike any military occupation in recorded history. Commander Alex Turner, who led the human administration of Zephyrian worlds, did not rule through fear or violence. Instead, he ruled through improvement. Turner's forces rebuilt Zephyrian cities, but they built them better than before. Human engineers designed new transportation systems, communication networks, and energy grids that made life easier and more comfortable for ordinary Zephyrian citizens. Within months, most Zephyrians had better living conditions under human rule than they had ever enjoyed under their own government. The humans did not steal Zephyrian resources. Instead, they invested in them. Human technology made Zephyrian farms more productive, Zephyrian factories more efficient, Zephyrian hospitals more advanced. Every change improved life for the average Zephyrian while making them more dependent on human expertise and human goodwill. They conquered us by making us grateful, Vextel said, his voice filled with bitter understanding. They turned occupation into liberation, defeat into improvement. How do you resist an enemy who makes your life better? Dr. Betty Cole's rehabilitation programs were the most disturbing aspect of the human occupation. Cole worked with former Zephyrian soldiers, helping them adjust to life in a peaceful galaxy. She did not punish them for their role in the war or force them to feel guilty about their past actions. Instead, Cole helped them understand why the war had been necessary from the human perspective. She showed them evidence of other aggressive alien species that humanity had encountered. She explained how the Zephyrian invasion had been part of a larger pattern of galactic violence that needed to be stopped. She made us believe that we had been the villains, Vextel explained, not because she lied to us, but because she showed us truths we had never considered. She made us see the war from the perspective of the species we had conquered, the worlds we had destroyed, the civilizations we had ended. Within a year, many former Zephyrian soldiers were volunteering to serve in human peacekeeping forces. They genuinely believed that humanity represented hope for a more stable, more prosperous galaxy. They saw themselves not as conquered enemies, but as reformed allies working toward a better future for all species. The most personal example of human transformation came from Dr. Joe Williams and his medical team. Williams had saved Vextel's life after the battle at Kepler Station, placing his lost limbs with advanced prosthetics and repairing damage that should have been fatal. But the medical treatment was more than just life-saving surgery. Williams had rebuilt Vextel stronger, faster, and more capable than he had ever been with his original biology. The artificial limbs never tired, never aged, never felt pain. The enhanced organs were more efficient than natural ones. The improved sensory systems gave him abilities no natural Zephyrian possessed. They saved my life by making me superhuman, Vextel said, flexing his metal fingers and watching the precision of their movement. But in doing so, they made me living proof of their superiority. Every day, with every enhanced breath I take, I am reminded that humans can improve on nature itself. The psychological impact extended beyond individual soldiers. Williams and his team treated thousands of wounded Zephyrians, always with the same result. The patients emerged from treatment grateful for human mercy and impressed by human capabilities. They became walking advertisements for the benefits of human rule. More disturbing was what happened to Zephyrian families. When enhanced former soldiers returned home, their relatives could see the improvements immediately. Wives and children who had feared for their warriors' safety were now confident that their enhanced family member was safer and stronger than ever before. We became jealous of our own prisoners, Vextel admitted. Families began to hope that their soldiers would be captured and improved. Parents started to see human enhancement as a gift they wanted for their children. Transformation came through education. Human teachers like Professor Karen White began working in Zephyrian schools, not to replace local instructors, but to supplement them. White taught human history, human science, human philosophy, but she taught these subjects as universal truths. Rather than specifically human ideas, Zephyrian children learned about human achievements in art, science, and technology. They learned about human values like individual freedom, scientific inquiry, and peaceful cooperation. They learned to see humanity not as conquerors, but as teachers, showing the galaxy a better way to live. Within 5 years, an entire generation of Zephyrian children grew up believing that humans were the natural leaders of galactic civilization, Vextel said. They did not see this as defeat or occupation. They saw it as progress. The economic integration completed the transformation. Human companies formed partnerships with Zephyrian businesses. But the humans always had the advanced technology, the superior knowledge, the essential resources. Zephyrian worlds became prosperous, but their prosperity depended entirely on continued human cooperation. We became successful junior partners in a human enterprise, Vextel explained. We had better lives, more opportunities, greater security, but we had them only as long as we remained useful to human interests. The recording device beeped its final warning. Vextel had only a few more minutes left. He wanted to end his testimony with a warning, but he was no longer sure what he was warning against. I am recording this to tell other species what they will face if they encounter humanity, he said slowly. But I am no longer certain whether that encounter should be feared or welcomed. The humans destroyed our empire, ended our way of life, and transformed our entire species. But they gave us better lives than we ever had before. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside interrupted his thoughts. Vextel recognized the gentle rhythm of human movement, so different from the heavy stride of Zephyrian warriors. A soft knock came at his door. "Commander Vextel," came a familiar voice. It was Dr. Williams, making his regular check on his patient's progress. "Are you ready for your therapy session?" Vextel looked at the recording device, then at his enhanced hand, then at the door where his human doctor waited patiently. Had spent months trying to understand what the humans had done to his species, but the answer was simpler than he had realized. "Yes, doctor," he said, turning off the recording device. "I am ready." He stood up, his enhanced legs carrying him smoothly to the door. As he walked, he thought about his final message to any alien species that might someday encounter humanity. But the message had changed from what he had intended when he started recording. "Be very careful if you meet the humans," he whispered to himself, "not because they will destroy you, but because they will make you grateful for the privilege of serving them. And the most terrifying part is that they will be right to do so."